It happens all the time. So thank
It was my
you.
first time that I said, oh my God, I'm getting old. I'm getting confused, about the dates and so on and so forth. So I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm sorry.
No worries. It's wonderful to be here tonight to be in conversation with you, Kim, and lovely to be meeting you for the first time. I just want to thank Jorge for the introduction and for the invitation to be here. It's an absolute honor and a pleasure to have this opportunity to be in conversation with Kim Thúy for the next hour. I also want to just acknowledge that I'm zooming in from my office at the UBC campus in Vancouver, which is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. As a former refugee from Cambodia, as a scholar and as a writer, I'm grateful to live and work and play as an uninvited guest on these lands. So I'm going to be chatting with Kim for the next 35 minutes or so, and I will encourage the audience members out there in the virtual space to submit your questions in the chat box. I'll do my best throughout the session to just scan the chat box and collect some questions as we go, but definitely during the last 15 minutes or so, I will draw out questions from the audience. So please feel free to submit your questions for Kim. So Kim, you've
Very
written...
nervous to be with you because I think you know so much about...
No. I'm nervous to be with you here with you. And I just finished reading your book. It's really an extraordinary book. I can only say that it's absolutely searing and beautiful and distills such complicated ideas and histories in ways that left me feeling very shaken by the end, but also not in a state of despair or in a state of sadness, because there is such a beautiful tenderness and light in the writing at the same time that you address such difficult scenes of violence and trauma for the Vietnamese community. So I wonder if you could just start by telling us the story, any kind of story that you want, a fragment, an anecdote about how you came to write this book.
There were so many pieces, before things become a book or before ideas can become a book of stories. I should not say ideas because they are all, true stories that I try to put them together, I would say. And one of the stories is one of the pieces, and I think that they are like pieces of a big puzzle, right? You just have one piece at a time, and then one day you just realize that you have enough pieces to make, to understand the whole picture. And so one of the pieces was this picture of a little baby in a cardboard box on a sidewalk, and next to the baby, and the baby, I didn't know if it was a girl or a boy, but half naked. And then outside of the box, almost like wrapping the box, it was an older boy, also sleeping like the baby, but really wrapping the cardboard box, and his hand was even on the box. And next to them there was an empty bowl, and I think the bowl was to beg for money or for food. And when you look at them, at these children, you realize you see it's the illustration of human misery, at the lowest level. And we cannot even understand how babies could be left there alone in that box. But then at the same time, and that struck me, that the contradiction, to see so much love and so much care from that boy, wrapping that box. And because of course he couldn't fit into the box, and the baby in the box was also too big for the box. So you could see that her legs, well, I knew later on, I tried to understand a little bit better of that picture, and I realized that the girl got adopted by American parents, and so she basically got the chance to have well, a normal life, I would say, or a life. Whereas the boy, I couldn't find any information about him. And this is where I said, but I want to pay homage to him because I felt so much love, from him for this little baby. And they were facing each other. And so, and at the beginning, I didn't want to write a story. It was just a picture that stayed with me and haunted me for 10 years. And then finally, I got to sit down and said, this has to be the beginning, the first, the first fire that would start, for the book.
It's so fascinating that you tell the story of the box, because that was the first question I actually wanted to ask you, is just about this image from your book. It's the only image in the book, and it's really striking because it's a box with what looks like threads kind of spilling out from the bottom into the ground, and also spiraling upwards into the word M, which is the title of the book. And it says that it's art by Louis Boudreau, the Montrealese artist,
Yes.
Louis Boudreau. And so
yeah, actually, he is a friend, and I wanted to show it to you because the French version has it as a cover, and it's a picture of the actual painting, which had been designed for the book, because I told him the story and I told him about this picture that was, hunting me, and he said, I have to make this painting for you. And I would never have enough money to commission such an art, because he's a great artist. So we would never have, a budget for this. But he volunteered and he said, I'll give you the cover, because the story, the story deserves, all the time and the effort from him. And so that's how it came to me.
It's really haunting to me too, after having read the book. And I also listened to your audiobook reading in English. And I came back to this image so many times, because on the one hand, it reminded me of the image of a neuron, kind of like a brain neuron, and also the image of roots from a tree kind of coming down, and as well as the images of tangled threads. And so I wondered if you could talk about just like the theme of truth, and maybe how you're playing with truth and history and fiction. To me, the idea of multiple truths kind of resonated with that image.
I gave myself the right to, to play with time, in the sense that certain events didn't happen, one after the other. There were maybe 10 years in between or 2 years in between, but I allowed myself to put them together. So I allowed myself to play with that I gave myself the freedom, because it was a war that lasted for 20 years. So it was very difficult for me to cover the 20 years and not contracting some of the times, so that we could understand that war in a book, in one tiny book, because I don't know how to write big books. Right. And so and also because of this painting. I got this painting before I finished the book. I was halfway through, and Louis already, had the painting ready, and he gave it to me. And it's such a beautiful painting. I'm really, I should have thought about it and bring it so you can see it, because he gave it to me. And that I was so scared that painting would be too beautiful, and I wouldn't be able to write, to be up to the task, basically. But it was the contrary. The painting gave me the right to not, like you said, they're like roots and routes, of brain cells in a way, and they are not tied together. If you look at the painting, the threads are all over, and they change, as you move the painting around. And so that gave me the freedom as well to play, with time and space sometimes with the stories. For example, the story where I talk about the pilot who picked up a child, a Vietnamese child, during the My Lai massacre. I think the true story is that the child was a boy, but I allowed myself to change it and said that it was a girl. But that event took place and it really happened. So yeah, where is truth and where is no truth? And I'm sure there were baby girls as well, or young girls who were present at that massacre. So it was maybe not true, but it was also true because there were boys and girls during that massacre, and he could have picked up a girl as well as a boy, and so that's where fiction and truth, I guess, are intertwined. And in this book, because as I was writing this, I realized that you don't know what is good and bad. Good and bad are everything depends on where you stand. And the most obvious one, I think, is when I say that the Americans, or outside of Vietnam, everybody calls this war the Vietnam War, right? It is known as the Vietnam War. But if you're a Vietnamese, you don't call it the Vietnam War, right? You call it the American War. And nobody is wrong in this, because if you're Vietnamese, you cannot call it the American, the Vietnamese War. And the Americans, they could not call it the Americans War. They have to call it the Vietnam War. So nobody is wrong. Everybody is right. It depends on where you stand. And if we go back to the American pilot picking up this child, it was a good thing to do. If you're Vietnamese, you look at this gesture and you say, wow, this is a hero, right? Daring to go against his own army, his own country, to save an enemy. But then if you're an American, you say, but you're a traitor. You are helping an enemy. And they are right also to say that, right? And so this book is really about that, and I try to see where's good, where's bad, and every time everything became confusing for me. And so I hope that I didn't confuse the reader too much.
No, I think, as a professor of literature, I took so much pleasure in just that kind of tangle of all the different characters and all the different threads that you were trying to pull through such an enormous and complicated history, starting from French colonization of French Indochina, and then going all the way up to the present moment in the Vietnamese diaspora. And so it was, like you said, kind of like a puzzle that the reader is sort of trying to piece together to see how every character is connected to each other or not connected to each other. And at the same time, there's so much nuance in every single character. There's no hero or villain, or pure hero, pure villain, pure good, or pure evil. It's all, it's everybody.
All us, right? We carry, and that's why I wanted to tell the story of the plantation, where it was owned by the French, and then this Vietnamese girl who was there as a rebel, right, from the resistance, and saying, yeah, I'm gonna kill this French owner, and so on and so forth. And then she fell in love, and you think that it's far-fetched, but actually these relationships have happened. I didn't invent it. And because if I did, I would never think that an enemy could fall in love with another enemy, right? One person could fall in love with his or her enemy, but actually in real life it happens, because your enemy, and we know this, right? The syndrome of Stockholm, that's how we call it, right? You would fall in love with the person who is dominating you, because that person is the closest to you, who is stronger than you. It's basically your hero, right? Because that person is dominating you. And so you look up to that person in a way, at the same time that you hate that person. And so these things happen, like these love stories happen. And then is it a good thing or is it a bad thing to fall in love with your enemy?
I just love the description of how she's an infiltrator on the rubber plantation, to sabotage her master's business. But then they kind of have this epic romance. And in the end, they end up having a child named Tam. And so, but since you mentioned the rubber plantation, I thought that one interesting thread that you actually pull through the whole history is that of the tree, because in the very first sort of chapter of the book is rubber. And then later on in the book, you describe the effects of the US military spraying of Agent Orange during the Vietnam War, and the effect that has had for generations going on to the present. So yeah, I guess, like, did you want to talk a little bit just about kind of colonialism, war, trees, and human life?
There's so much, right, to talk about, and this is where, at the same time, I wanted to talk about our brain, how humans are so resilient, and we are geniuses. For we invented, I'm gonna say, as humans, because the Vietnamese hid them in the forest. So one way to see them is to destroy the forest, right? So that's why Agent Orange has been created to kill the trees, to make the leaves fall so that you can see your enemy. How bright is that, right? Because the war was in the air and the other one was on the ground. And then, but the Vietnamese said, "Oh yeah, you're gonna take the trees away? Then we're gonna hide ourselves in tunnels. So we're just gonna go into tunnels, and you cannot reach us anymore." And then the other side said, "It's true, we cannot see you anymore. So how can we eliminate you then?" And I think about it, I said, "Oh, we have to invent another pesticides to kill rice, because then you cannot eat. Even if you come out of your tunnel, even if you live in tunnels, you have to eat. So let's destroy rice." And that's how one agent got created after the other. And I just want to mention that the designer of the book, she went and looked for the real colors which were used to identify the different agent, because there were agent blue, green, they were all rainbow operation, right, back then, because there were so many different pesticides. And so I wanted to show how resilient we are. If we cannot kill you in one way, we're going to try to kill you a different way. And on the other side, say, "You want to try this way? I have a different method to hide myself." And I have the chance to meet with a soldier, a former soldier. She was a doctor in the army of North Vietnam, and she's today, I think she's about 92 or 93, and she told me that she accompanied a Westerner, a European, who is very famous for his documentaries, and so this man, he wanted to be at the close to the front line. And so they went to the front line, and there was a lot of bombing, so they had to go into a tunnel. And apparently in that area, at first they dug the tunnels only 4 meters deep, but then the bombs were so powerful that even at 4 meters it was not deep enough, so they went down to 9 meters deep. And so she said that there were cameras that were so heavy that they had to go down into those tunnels at 9 meters. And that night, when they hid themselves there was she could hear a woman screaming because she was giving birth. And because she the soldiers, she was a doctor, so she went and helped to give birth to this woman. without anything, only by sound. And apparently the documentarist, he taped it. He taped the whole situation. And so the doctor, she could hear what happened afterwards, because during the operation it was a difficult birth, and so it took a long time, and a lot of crying, a lot of screaming, and that's how she became a documentarist herself, because she wanted to archive lives, during those extreme, in those extreme situations. And
Yeah, I mean,
when you think about it, for us humans to continue to make, to be able to carry a baby in those extreme, extreme circumstances, it's incredible how resilient we are as humans.
it's really extraordinary. Your discussion of giving birth during wartime and how many women actually were able to, were forced into the position where they had to give birth during such difficult circumstances. And so one thing I noticed too is the theme of family in your story, is in your book, is really quite fascinating in the way that you're mapping out different kinds of families. I think you use the term ephemeral families in the English translation, and you write like, these are families formed at random. These are one line that really stood out to me was, one adopts another while grasping a hand, reaching up after a fall. So on page 70. And so what I found really interesting was that not only do you experiment with the kind of character sketch or the literary sketch, but also when you put all of these sketches of the different characters together, it forms a very unconventional family tree, in that you're not telling the story of the history of the Vietnam War and its afterlife through a conventional family tree where we follow each generation of a biological family. But in your book, the family is kind of a family that has had to endure the pressures of war and surviving war and giving birth in war, and then reconstituting itself constantly. And so, yeah, what did you want to say?
You have understood the book better than I do.
No,
I'm so happy that you could see this, but I was not conscious, and it was not voluntary, in the sense that, because in a war, everything, I just feel that everything keeps exploding, right? And everything is being fragmented. In any, the Vietnamese, the boat people, you leave, and then after that, you don't know which country would accept you. And then so even though we left together, my aunts and my mom, my family, one got accepted to the US, another one to Australia, another one to France, by France, and us in Canada. And you cannot foresee, where we would go. And especially back then, we didn't know if we were going to see each other again. When we left the refugee camp for Canada, we just thought, that's it, and we didn't know if my aunt, who was left behind, if she would even survive, because she had a very small baby. And we had no ways, to help her. Once we got to Canada, we couldn't even help ourselves yet. And so, but then today she's in the US, she's doing fine, like all of us, we are very lucky. Everybody survived. But then I was inspired by my time in the refugee camp and in the boat when we crossed the sea, is that in that camp, it doesn't, because there were people who had lost their loved ones because of a wreckage, because of raping, because of all kinds of things that could happen at sea, right? And they arrive in those camps alone. And you cannot survive alone. Here you can, because you have the social system, around you, a whole structure to help you. You have, if you want to go to the hospital, you can call the ambulance, right? You can call a taxi, you can call. But in Vietnam, even in the 90s, I remember that if you go to the hospital and you don't have anybody to bring you food, then you don't eat because there's no food. And so in all hospital rooms, you would have a bed also for not a bed, but just a kind of a place for someone to sleep there with you, to take care of you in the hospital, right? And we're talking about you having enough money to stay in the hospital. So imagine all of those who don't. And so in a society which is not like ours, where we can count on buses, on public transportation and all of that, you need each other to survive. And so in the camp, it was even more extreme, right? You have to line up for 24 hours before you can get to the well and get a little bit of water. And then another person has to spend the whole day to gather branches to make fire. And so if you're alone, you cannot survive. You simply cannot survive. And so it's very funny how one would adopt another, very easily under those circumstances. And when I was I was based in Vietnam when I was a lawyer. I worked in Vietnam for a couple of years, and I could see all these children on the street, sharing a bowl of rice, sharing a piece of bread. They do share a lot, contrarily to what we think. We think that wealth will help us share, but actually no. Wealth is to allow you to have your own car, so you don't have to share the bus. It allows you to have your own room, your own house, your own swimming pool, your own plane, at one point, your own spaceship sometimes. But that's what wealth does. It's not that we want to isolate ourselves, but because the comfort we're looking for isolate ourselves from others, and so we don't see the needs of other people anymore, right? Because it's too far away from us. Whereas in extreme situations like these orphans on sidewalks, or in a refugee camp where I was, you live one next to another. There are no walls, there's nothing. So you see the needs of everybody. And that's where, as humans, we cannot not lend a hand. You cannot eat your bowl of rice alone when you can see all the people around you starving. And it's not even conscious. It's very funny how these things just happen. And I remember in the camp at one point, I don't know why, but we got a bag of kind of Coca-Cola, but a local Coca-Cola, and it was a very, a small portion, and it was poured into a plastic bag because they want to recycle or not reuse the bottle right away. So when you buy a Coca-Cola, they would put it in a bag with a lot of ice. Yeah, you see what I'm talking about, with a straw planted in the middle and a rubber band to close it. And it was so hot, and we haven't had, water for so long. And so forget ice. We had not seen ice for many months, right? And then it was there, right, under the sun. And you can see the condensation of all those little droplets of water around the bag. And we were a group of 13. So I said to myself, I still remember looking at that bag, and I said, I will never have a sip of this, because I have my brothers who are younger than me. So of course they would drink the whole bag, because I would drink the whole bag. It was not enough. And I don't know why, and how, because we didn't speak to each other and we didn't give orders or anything, but nobody drank of that bag. So that bag could travel many times among the 13 of us. And we only touched, I think, that straw with a little bit of water. But that was it. And today, I'm not sure if we have that back, and we have 13 of us, we would fight for it and we would go for the kill, right? And so it's extraordinary, and that's what I wanted to show, how humans can really support each other even in difficult times, or even more in difficult times.
That's a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that. The title of this event is Love as an Act of Resistance. And when you were telling those stories, it kind of made me think about how sharing adoption, caring for each other in refugee camps, helping a woman giving birth during wartime, those are actually the acts of love that you're referring to, right? Not the sort of romantic, melodramatic love.
Story.
But you have the romantic love too.
I have to tell you about this romantic story. The same soldier who is 90, 92, 93 now, she said that when she was in the jungle, they had only 30 grains of salt per day, right? And that was their ration,
Yeah.
right? So she said that each of them, they had only 30 grains. And I was going to ask her, how do you count salt? You don't count salt. But that was her ration. And she said that somehow, the delivery of food and salt and all of that didn't arrive in the jungle for many, many days. So they ran out of salt. And your body apparently needs salt. And it does react to the absence of salt. And so there was one soldier who still have 15 grains of salt in his reserve. And so he gave her those 15 grains of salt and declared at the same time his love for her.
Wow.
And that's how they got married and got 3 children. And in the book, on the first page, I did talk about her having these 2 children and trying to walk hundreds of kilometers on her own with the 2 babies. And she couldn't carry both of them because they were too heavy for her to run with them. And so if I did not hear it from her directly, she was sitting 1 meter from me, so I could not believe her. But she said that the idea she had was to attach them to a branch, to attach one child to a branch so that she can run with the other one, and attach the other one to another branch to avoid them being attacked by wild animals in the jungle. And what a genius. I have thought about this. And then to survive and walk hundreds of kilometers with these 2 children that way. How could that be, right? And she became so well. Yes, again, apparently when they had to move around at night in order to hide themselves from the enemy, she said that they, in order to follow each other, one after the other, they would use the eggshells, the empty eggshells, and put how do you call that? Those little insects, which are very bright, like little lights.
Fireflies?
Yes, fireflies. They put the fireflies in the eggshell, and the eggshells become like a light that they would, tie around their waist. And so because it's a natural light, so the enemy could not identify, the convoy as they move from one point to the next. My God, how crazy is that?
These details that you're sharing are just, they're just mind-blowing, and they illustrate to me so much of what I know from, growing up within a refugee community and within a Cambodian family myself, but also from what I've read. I don't know if you know the book, The Best We Could Do, by the Vietnamese American author Thúy.
Yes.
It's a graphic novel, and she, at one point in the graphic novel, she says she refers to her refugee reflex, and and what she's referring to is when a fire breaks out in her home in California, the first thing she does is run to the safe as a 14-year-old girl and grabs her family's immigration papers because she knows that, that is the most valuable thing to the refugee family. If the whole house goes up in flames, it doesn't matter. They just need those documents. And so,
I always have my passport. I always have my passport with me.
And so, those survival tactics, the resourcefulness, that resiliency that you're talking about, and just that genius actually carries on long after the war, but into the diaspora and even into the second and subsequent generations as well. And so, I really appreciate what you're saying just about how this genius or this refugee reflex, it's not just about one's own personal survival either, but it's about taking care of each other, and it's about adopting and taking in somebody and caring for somebody that's not part of necessarily what you would qualify as your family, your biological family. But the idea of family is so much broader and extends to the whole community. I'm seeing a message from Jorge here that I should invite the audience to submit some questions, and maybe start the audience Q&A at 8 p.m. So to everyone out there, yes, I encourage you once again to send in some questions for Kim and type them in the chat, and I can definitely read them out to Kim.
There's someone who's writing from Somerville, Massachusetts, and it sounds like, I don't know, is it a family member of mine? I don't know. I think I'm family everywhere. Is that, this must be from a family member, because I recognize
somebody
Somerville.
from, yeah, I don't, there's no message. It's just Cambridge, Somerville.
Are you related to me? Please tell me. But when we talked about supporting, to have this community, and that's why I wanted to talk about the nail polish, industry.
Yes, right.
In this book, because it started off with something so simple, right? Tippi Hedren, like the actress who loved Vietnam because she had been to Vietnam for a movie, and so when she heard about the Vietnamese coming into the US, she said, I have to go visit them, because she had a soft spot for us. And so she went into this camp, and this is a true story. One of the Vietnamese women just complimented her about her nail, said, your nails are so beautiful. And then from there she said, I have a way to help them. And that's how she asked the technician to come and give the first group of Vietnamese, I think there were about 20, a class on how to do nails. That's how you say it. I don't know how.
To do manicure. It's absolutely really, really surprising to me. I don't think that is a historical fact that many people know about, like the fact that it was the lead actress in Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds who traveled to a refugee camp and then gave a manicure class to Vietnamese women in the camps, who then taught hundreds of thousands of other Vietnamese women, and then spread this nail salon empire around the world. It's
and it has become like a $10 billion like industry. How could that be? And it started only 45 years ago, and in a refugee camp in California, when all the Vietnamese arrived the first time, they were put, in one place, and it started off with one kindness, right? And it exploded. And then when I first discovered this story, I said, I have to talk about this. I have to talk about how one small gesture can make a huge difference, not only for one person, not only for 100%, 100 persons, but for an entire community across North America, not only in the US, not only in California, but really all over the world, right? But then 40 years later, you discover that these women who work with nail polish suffer more, get more cancer. The ratio is higher with the manicurists. So you say, so is it a good thing or a bad thing?
Yes.
If that gesture, that kindness didn't happen, would there be an industry of nail polish today as we know it?
And
You don't know, right?
you don't know, and would there be so many, as you said, the toxic effects of working in nail salons? Was that a gift, or was that actually a curse bestowed upon the Vietnamese community by the lead actress from Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds? It's not clear. And so
it's so crazy, right? Something good could become something bad, but then if it didn't happen, what would have happened to the Vietnamese? What would we be today? Because so all these questions, right? And it was so, like I told you at the beginning, it was so confusing. What is the angle? Where do I stand in all of those things? And because I don't know, I still don't know, so I leave it to you, to the readers to decide.
So, Kim, let me ask you just about the ending, because I was really intrigued because you end your book with a chapter called Cold War. And this got me really interested because I'm also writing a book about the Cold War in Cambodia. And so when I came to this chapter, it struck me that throughout the book, you really go to lengths to kind of challenge the idea of one absolute truth and, one comprehensive history that you're trying to tell, and you're really destabilizing the idea of one historical truth. But with this chapter that you end with, it was almost as if you did want to kind of lay down where you stand and sort of set down something that was a bit more concrete for the audience to take away with when they're reading a book that is sometimes challenging truth. And what I was left with was this image of the chessboard and the way in which you show the main players in the Cold War, China, the Soviet Union, and the United States. And then you allude to the fact that the board consists of the sort of players like Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, and the way in which the actual boards were destroyed by these major players. And then when the war was over, these players just then shook hands again, and all of the stories that took place on that board just sort of vanished from the historical record. And so, did you want to say something about where you stand around this topic in that last chapter?
Where I stand is that wars are useless. We cannot solve anything with wars, and wars only give victims. Even those who win are hurt. Nobody wins in a war. And this is what, and it came from the idea that even today, the Vietnamese themselves are torn by this war, which happened on their territory, but didn't concern them really. They just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, I would say. And it's happening again today, in the sense that, I think a couple of months ago, when Vietnam was in the middle of the fourth wave of COVID, they were totally attacked by the fourth wave. Kamala Harris went to Vietnam to inaugurate the CDC, a building for a new CDC, a new center there, and also to announce, I think, a new, I don't know, something about the embassy and so on and so forth. And when you think about it, it's that, oh, why? How come during this, challenging time, Kamala Harris, she's quite busy. I don't think she needed to go to Vietnam. Why Vietnam is important enough for her to be there. And then you realize that no, it's not because Vietnam is important enough. It's just because Vietnam right now is more under the care, I would say, of China. China is really very present. It has 3 ports, one on the east and 2 on the west of Vietnam. So it's all around Vietnam, basically. And so I think the US is trying to say to China, we are still present and we still care about Vietnam. So you think that you have your hands on this territory, but actually not really, you know. If you do something, we can react. And so it's happening kind of again.
Again, yes.
And so I wanted to portray that you know, the smaller countries, the weaker countries don't really have a say in any wars, and they are only victims. And the problem is they are victims among themselves, among brothers and sisters. And I give you just one idea, one thing, like my mother, it's been 45 years and she still has not accepted the flag which represents Vietnam today. It's been 45 years. How long would it take you to, but she couldn't, because she lost so much, you know, through that war, that she couldn't accept what is, you know, what has happened to her in a way. So she's stuck, you know, with that idea. And on the other side, you know, in Vietnam, yes, there are some publishers who are interested in my book, but they would have to change certain words or take out certain words. And he said, it's been 45 years. Can we get on with this? You know, can we get over this? But we can't. And I understand, you know, when in the book you say, oh, people were fleeing the Communist Party, but right now it's still the Communist Party. So how can you allowed, you know, how can you allow a book to be published this way? So I also understand them, you know, they also lost so much blood in this war. So I understand, you know, them, and I understand my mom, and nobody's wrong in this.
Yeah.
The only wrong thing is that there had been a war.
Yes. And so it's not actually a conclusion to a war that happened 40 years ago with the Cold War, but it's sort of unfortunately, it's a kind of foreboding of a new Cold War, or these major players coming back in, stepping in again, and potentially replicating a cycle. And
you see it with Afghanistan. It happened, you know, if there are some pictures that people are posting, you see the helicopter and the people, you know, running. They are basically the same pictures.
Yes.
And they're like 45 years in between, right? It's almost the same helicopters, maybe inside the, you know, today the helicopter is more modern and more powerful, but otherwise humans are the same. And so she said, did we learn anything from the first time, you know? And actually no, because humans have not changed. We have not mutated, you know?
And maybe we didn't learn anything from the history of the Vietnam War and the costs to life, and the legacies.
Because we still have the same heart. You know, we still have and we forget to say this, but I think all of us, you know, humans, we are capable of cruelty, we're capable of meanness, of jealousy, of envy, of how do you say, power hungry, you know, all of that. We are that. And it's just that we don't recognize it. You know, we will mask it by saying, oh, we're fighting because we want democracy. We're supporting democracy. Or we're fighting because we want, it's our love for our country and so on. But it's not. It's just you want to dominate something. You know, it's just about power. Can we just say this? At least it would be clear why we're going into war, right?
It's about power, and maybe it's also about, you know, extracting greed, like extracting resources like rubber, and opening up free markets for American goods.
But I think we should just say that, you know.
Exactly.
Okay, so whoever wants power, let's go to war, and then at least it's clear. You know, we're not fighting for democracy or for the love of anything. It's just power. There are
Ma-
questions, right?
Yeah, there are quite a few
Questions.
questions here. If it's okay, I'll pose this
Yeah.
question from CHN. Sorry, was responding to the host's invitation to tell you where I'm zooming from. Not a relative of Kim Thúy, but a literary scholar of the Vietnamese diaspora. Okay, so not having read the newest book, I'm wondering how Kim Thúy moves from works that are so closely tied to the Vietnam War to works more oriented towards everyday life in Canada and in the diaspora. What new directions are you thinking of taking in future work?
Oh, I have no idea. You know, when I write, I never know what I'm gonna write about. And like for example, for this book, I wanted to just to write a love story. I want something like Barbara Cartland. I don't know if you know this. I want
No.
I wanted to write something totally romantic and light and easy and yeah, you know, like just yeah, a beautiful love story. But it turned out to be a very, I don't know, dance, not dance, but I don't know.
It is a dance in the sense that there's light and some very
serious issues. I would,
serious scenes as well. Right, it's sort of a dance between
but
horror and light.
yeah, and I would say that every day when I sit down to write, it's always as a reader, in the sense that I want to know what will happen next to the characters, because I don't know in advance what will happen to them, and you know, I'm 24 hours before I pushed a button, you know, for it to go to the printer, and I had only 24 hours, and I don't know what happened to me. I opened it up and I deleted 1/3 of the book.
Oh,
So
no.
10,000 words on 30,000 words. So that's a lot, you know. So the book basically shrank. And it was very difficult to delete because, you know, it's like a table with 4 legs, and then you take one leg away. You have to reshape the table because otherwise it doesn't hold anymore, right? The balance was different. And I still remember I finished at 4 in the morning, and at 6 I had to wake up and be ready for the TV show where I'm the host, so I had to be really ready for this. So I said to myself, why am I so crazy to take away? And the part that I took away was the part that I wanted to write at the very beginning, meaning the love story,
Mm.
but it didn't work anymore.
But it's still a love story. Every vignette, every sketch has an act of
Has
love
love.
in it,
Okay,
and
you
I
can
think
smell love, right?
yeah, and to me the love story is about the kind of refusal to stop grasping for seeking out that truth or seeking out um, those stories, right? Because this is something that we think we know, but it's not something that we know from a certain perspective, which is from the perspective of Vietnamese
Mm.
refugees
And so
themselves.
I don't know what I will write next. I must admit, maybe that's it. Maybe that's all
No.
I got, you know. And
No. You do say that it's unfinished truth, right? And so you have to keep writing.
so and after every book, I think that's it. I don't have any more to say, but there are always new encounters, new stories which come to me, and then one day, you know, they all come together, fighting, you know, for a space in my head, and say, okay, that's it. You have to sit down and write about us, I would say, because the picture, I saw that picture 10 years ago, a long time ago. And then I met with Naomi Bronstein, the one you can read in the book. She's a real person, you know, and I met with her daughter, Heidi Bronstein, who is a food stylist. And she knew so much about Vietnamese food. And I said, how come? And she said, oh, because my mom, she adopted, you know, 5 Vietnamese children, and she had an orphanage in Vietnam. And that's how Heidi knew so much about Vietnamese food. And so she started telling me the story how Naomi, just right after she gave birth to Heidi, who was only about five days old, apparently. Naomi, the mother, went to Vietnam in order to bring out the children and put the children on that first plane of the Operation Baby Lift. And she was on that plane, and apparently she said to Heidi that somebody told her that there is another plane the next day, that she should, leave the plane and go find more orphans for the next plane. And that's how she got out of the plane, which exploded, right? And I try to understand, because Heidi said to me that there's a picture of her, of Naomi, looking at this disaster of this explosion. So you could imagine her mindset at that point in time, to say she was trying to save these orphans, but then at the end, half of them died during the explosion. So how do you live with that? How do you continue to have faith in humanity, faith in you, faith in what you do? So do you dare to go back and put more orphans on a plane, when you just saw one plane exploding? But then again, in those under these extreme circumstances, you don't think the same way, and humans become bigger than ourselves, and we become courageous and heroic. Malgré nous, like we say. I don't know in French, but in English, it's despite the fact that we are who we are, we have the strength to be, larger than life, right?
So thinking about, just adding to that question about Canada and coming to where we are now. I'm in Vancouver and you're in Montreal, and there's a whole new generation and second, third generation of Vietnamese refugee descendants. I know one of my cousins is zooming in from Montreal right now, and her family owns a Vietnamese restaurant in Montreal. And so did you want your book to connect with the Vietnamese diaspora and the second generation in a specific way? Were you hoping that this book would speak to them, or that it would kind of help rebuild some kinds of intergenerational dialogue?
It's very funny how, the generation of my parents, they don't care about what I write. They were there, they were the actors of they were the how do you say that, the witness, not the witnesses, but they were the active part of this story. So they know the story better than I do. So they're like, what does she know, right? So they don't care so much. But funny enough, the younger generation, younger than me, or my generation, they do come to me a lot. And they tell me that there are many people, readers, who would come to me and say that because of these books, they could ask questions to their parents and ask them how did it happen. And I remember one time there was a mother with a daughter who came to me, and she was all proud to say that the daughter worked with Celine Dion, like, and somehow, and for her clothes or something like that, she was the assistant of the stylist, and so the mom was telling me this, and then I asked the mom. I said, "Oh, so how come you're here?" And she said, "Oh, my daughter asked me to come to this conference, this meeting with you, because she said, I know the story, there was no point of going. But then the daughter said, no, I want you to come with me, blah, blah, blah." And she came, and then so I asked her, the mother, I said, "Oh, when did you arrive in Canada?" Because she was in Nova Scotia, in a tiny town in Chipagan, where she spoke French with the Acadian accent.
Wow.
It was very weird to have a Vietnamese who spoke French with an Acadian accent mixed with Vietnamese accent.
Wow.
Can you imagine how beautiful that is? What a cocktail, right? So I said, how come you're here in this small town? And then she started explaining, and she said she left when she was 21, and then her boat, pirates and so on and so forth. And the daughter was there and said, Mom, how come you've never told me this story? And this is where, you can feel that she didn't want to transfer the weight of that history on to her daughter.
Mhm.
But what she didn't realize was that her silence also had a weight.
Mhm.
So maybe talking would make the weight lighter, and so they did write to me later on that, they have been spending a lot of time talking about her journey up to now, all the challenges that she had to face. So many younger generation would write to me. So I guess I could be a little bit useful sometimes.
I think much more than a little bit useful, in the sense that with the students that I talk to, and also, Cambodian and Vietnamese refugees in the younger generation, I hear the same thing. It's like, my parents haven't told me anything. Do you have any books that you can recommend about this history? I want to open up a conversation. And so your book, I think, will have this effect of allowing that weight of silence to be a little bit lighter, right? Because it's something for them to use as a door, to open a door for a kind of conversation with their parents or their grandparents.
You make me remember one story really beautiful. I have to tell you, because it's a love story. And before we go to bed, I think it's worth hearing a love story from all of
Always.
this. Is that, so these children, like my parents, what they are, my parents' friends. And then one day, because I was there, because I was younger, and I am always curious, right, about the journey, because each of us has a different journey. Each boat has its own destination, and so on and so forth. So I asked them, I said, oh, so how did you leave, and how all this came about? How come you're in Quebec? And then she said that she was 16 when she fell in love with her husband, who was a little bit older, and he was already a doctor, and he worked with the army, so he was in the front line a lot. And so they did see each other a little tiny bit from time to time, but most of the time he would send her, a flower from the front line, or a rock, or little things. And she said that she kept all of that in a box, in a tin box. And one day her father stormed into the house and said everybody, they had to leave because the bombing was coming into their town. And the only thing she picked up was that tin box, and she ran, and on the tarmac she fell, and the box opened itself, and everything spilled on the tarmac. And the parents were screaming, to tell her to come into the plane, because the bombing was coming, so the tarmac would not be usable anymore, and she couldn't leave her things. And so she put everything back into, and she got scolded by everybody in the plane, and so on and so forth. But somehow, miraculously, they found each other again in a different town, and they got married, and they had children, and they left Vietnam because of re-education camp after the war, because he was part of the losing side, and so they had to flee. And they arrived in Montreal. They were, of course, very poor, like all of us. So they shared the same apartment. The four of them shared the same apartment with another family, and the other family worked from home with sewing machine, right? They would sew clothes like I have done, like all of us.
My mother did that too.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, but her husband had the chance to study and write exams to become a doctor again. So she said to her husband, she said, okay, I'll take care of everything, of the kids, of the rent, of everything. The only thing I asked you is to study, to concentrate on studying. And he didn't have a space in the apartment, a tiny apartment. So his desk basically was in the closet. And it was a tiny closet that he said that he couldn't sit face to the door. He had to sit on the side, right? With a little lamp.
I had to do that during COVID.
And that's how he studied. And he said that, and she said that she worked 2 and sometimes 3 jobs in the same day. And she worked for Dunkin' Donut because it was open 24 hours, right? So she said every night when she came home, before she climbed up the stairs, she would put a smile on her face. She would wear a smile. That's the verb that she used, because she said that she didn't want her husband to feel the weight of her effort. Otherwise he would lose concentration, right, on what he was doing. And so he did become a doctor. And they got 3 children finally. And when he got his diploma again, she said, okay, now my turn to go back to university. And then she created this software, whatever, and made a whole lot of money. So the 3 children are now doctors. And they were there at the table with us. And they said, how come we have never heard this story? That the mom had never told them that she put a smile on her face every time that she came home, just to make sure that, they could, that it was light.
What an act of love, right? From mother to children.
Yeah. And I said, how come you've never told your children, And the children said, how come you need her to ask you the question so you would tell the story? So sometimes, I think books or a person from the outside can initiate, conversations that within a family we don't do it naturally, I would say.
Yeah, that's a beautiful love story, I think, to end the night with. I know it's getting really late in Montreal, Kim. It's like 10:30 or almost.
It's okay.
I could sit here and just chat with you all night. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation tonight. But I think we do have to wrap up. Is that right?
Thank you so much for your image of, ephemeral family that in the book, everything. So I'm going to quote you now. I'm going to Frankfurt because Canada is the guest countries this year to the Frankfurt Book Fair. So I'm gonna quote you.
But that's your line, or Sheila Fishman's translation. I wonder what ephemeral family is in French. Oh, I wonder what
it's exactly that. Les familles éphémères.
Famille éphémère.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry to cut this off because it's such a wonderful conversation. And you've been so generous with sharing all these stories and your experiences. So really, thank you. It's made me adore your book even more, just hearing all the threads that you've been able to pull, Idang and Kim, all you've shared. So really, I'm so grateful that you were here. Thank you so much for being part of this.
Thank you. And I'm sorry again for being such a ignorant.
Thank you so much for being here, and everyone in the audience for spending your evening with us. I just want to remind people that if you want to watch the event again, Kim or Idang, if you want to share it with other people that weren't able to attend, this was live streamed to our Facebook page, so you can find it on the VPL's Facebook page and people can see it there. Also, we're a public library, so we want to make sure that we're programming things that the public wants. So we're going to share a quick feedback survey, and if you want to fill it out, it'll take about 1 minute or 2 minutes to fill it out. I promise you the replies don't go to a black hole of the internet. We read them, and we make sure that we adapt our programming based on what people tell us. And the last thing I'll say before wrapping up is that we do have 2 really incredible events coming up as well. So on October 20th, we're hosting CBC journalist Ian Hannah-Mansing, and he has a new book out called Pandemic Spotlight, where he talks about the 9 Canadian infectious disease doctors who took on a very public role to guide us during COVID-19. And so he's going to be talking about that. And then on October 27, we're going to be honoring Islamic Heritage Month with an event with Omar Mualem, who has a new book out called Praying to the West, about how Muslim communities across the Americas have shaped the continent. So thanks everyone for being here, for your patience, for your love, for your generosity in sharing. It's been so beautiful. And that's it from me. Thanks for coming. We're going to keep the event open for a few minutes just so people can click on some of the links we've shared. But that's it from
that. I can show you my pajama because I changed, right? I thought it was tomorrow, so I changed. So I had time to change only the top.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Oh, sorry.
Sending you a hug. Thank you.
Launching your new book in your pajamas. That's
Yeah,
truly extraordinary.
Because, you know, I did put on lipstick. I was all ready. And then I checked the Zoom and it said October 7. I said, but today is October 6th. So I got totally confused. I even said to my son, I said, oh, I don't know, you know, how come we have this confusion? And then I started changing into pajamas to okay, comfy and say, where are you?
What's incredible is that you were able to just show up on stage as if nothing was going on. So
absolutely.
I already had my lipstick on.
Okay. Good night.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you
so much. Thank you, Idan.
Thank you, Kim.
Bye-bye.
Bye.